and welcome everyone to a new episode. I'm Astrid, your APD, and today I am having Paul Cotter with me. We're talking about exercises, good or bad, which one is good for hypertrophy or strength, which ones are not so good, perhaps overrated or underrated.
Okay, I have this rapid Q&A in terms of good and bad exercise choices for body part. And if you can pick one, just one that would be kind of the best to target that particular muscle. But before going into that, I wanted to sort of make a really good clarification of what makes an exercise or a movement pattern actually good to begin with.
For hypertrophy, there's a few things that we look at. Number one, we want to make sure that it fits your individual structure. And so that means that, say, if you're a taller person and you need to maybe, like, instead of doing squats, maybe a leg press fits your structure better. So it's all about picking exercises that fit your body type and your structure. Most exercises, especially machines or dumbbells, they can be altered to fit your structure better so that you're moving the weight through space in an appropriate way. Good mechanics to load the tissue that you're trying to train. So all of these things matter. And then movements that are good from a hypertrophy standpoint tend to have a high degree of bracing. We talked about it a little earlier. So with like say a hack squat or a leg press compared to a back squat. Well, a hack squat tends to have a back pad on it, right? That your back rests up against. And it tends to have the shoulder pads that are up here. And then with a leg press, you're sitting in the actual seat, right? And you push your feet on the pad. So there's a lot of bracing. All you're focusing on is getting set up and then going to work, right? Working really hard. But if you're performing something like a squat or a front squat, there's a lot of bracing you have to do with your body. For example, if you do a squat, you have to have a high degree of bracing in your trunk or your core, right? You have to make sure that you're moving in a really specific way to actually provide the stability to the joints so that the other muscles that are actually moving the load can work at a high level. So what we really want in good hypertrophy movements is we want a high degree of external bracing that we don't have to focus or allocate energy or muscle expenditure to the actual bracing itself. The actual machine is offering us up a high degree of stability in the way that you can just get inside it, or say with some dumbbells, even though there's more stability involved with dumbbells. But if we have good bracing, then that means we're going to be able to just put out a lot of effort into the set. And that's a high degree of effort, getting how we get mechanical tension on that tissue. That's what causes the tissue to grow. The other thing is that we're generally looking at a good resistance profile. So that would be a whole long conversation in itself. But basically, we want to load, that comes back to the length to tension relationship. We want to load the muscle more maximally, sometimes at certain lengths than others. For example, a lot of times I'll do stuff like reverse band to hack squats. So when you squat to the bottom, it actually deloads a little bit. It doesn't feel as heavy at the bottom because what I'm looking for is a specific resistance profile for a hack squat where I'm not overly loaded at the bottom, where the quads are more lengthened and I'm getting a lot of mechanical damage there because maybe I don't want that. So for a movement like a glute bridge, you're going to want to like hold that top position there because that's where going to be the resistance is going to be maximal. So that's training the glutes in the short position, stuff like that. So if you were doing a curl, specific type curl, like a preacher curl, the resistance profile is going to be more of a bell curve, but you're going to still want to hold the bar, the dumbbell at the top in that short position where the bicep is fully shortened and contracting. So there's some things like tempo and there's some things like resistance profiles that we look at too. But from what's good hypertrophy movement is that it fits our structure really well. So it fits how we're built, and then we execute it with a high degree of good mechanics so that we're loading very specific muscles, very specific tissue, and then that we work really hard, and that those movements tend to have a high degree of ability. So we don't do anything on like a Bosu ball or anything that's wobbly or whatever, because that requires us to stabilize, and then we can't produce as much force. Think about it this way. The stability thing, the less stable you are, the less loading you can move. If I put you on a Bosu ball, you have almost no stability, so you can't move very much weight, right? But if I put you in a hack squat, you have a lot of stability, right? So you can load up a lot of weight. that's better for hypertrophy.
And would that be different for strength?
No, strength is going to be, again, that comes back to what are you trying to get strong on? So
Okay.
trying to get strong across, if you're a strongman competitor, then you've got to get stronger across the movements that you're going to compete in. If you're a powerlifter, it's the big three. So strength almost always comes back to focusing on very specific movements, and it's usually a more limited amount.
Okay. Now let's get into the exercises. So the game is like this. I'm going to mention a few exercises that maybe people believe they are good exercises to target that particular muscle, and maybe it is a good exercise, maybe it's not a good exercise at all. And you're going to let me know, yes, it is good, or it's not as good, and if it's not as good, why it's not as good. Okay, all right, let's get into the first one. So when targeting quads, what do you think about single leg squats? Good or bad?
For targeting quads, depending on how they perform, if they're heel elevated with a high degree of knee flexion, good.
Okay. SISSY squats.
SISSY squats for training the length of position are good.
Okay. Step ups.
Step ups are going to be more glute focused.
Okay. So bad.
Or for quads, it would be down, but it's still a good movement.
Yeah, we're targeting quads, not glutes. So, but people think that step ups can be a good exercise for quads. So it's good to sort of differentiate that.
Okay.
Squat jumps with a loop band.
No.
Okay, let's move to hammies. But do you have any preference in terms of like what would be your best exercise recommendation for quad development?
Yeah, for quads, leg extensions to train the quads in short positions, basically the only movement you could do that in. And then from what I would consider best to worst, would pendulum squats would probably be the best, and then like various hack squat machines, leg press using a lot of knee flexion, and then last would be heel elevated safety bar squats.
Okay, hammies. All right, this one is very controversial, and I want you to clarify it. Sumo deadlifts.
It's not, no.
Okay, why not?
Why is it not hamstrings? The hamstrings are going to play a role in stabilizing the knee in a sumo deadlift like that. But when you get in a wide stance and are really externally rotated, the things that you're going to be hitting the most there is number one, piriformis, because anytime you get into hip flexion and then you get abduction, you're going to be, the piriformis is what is actually performing that abduction. Okay. And so, but if you're actually looking at what muscle is going to be forming the hip extension from that position, it's going to be the adductor magnus, because the glutes don't have any leverage to move the load, right? And the hamstrings, when you squat down like that, basically you end up with this more, once you have knee flexion and hip flexion, the hamstrings just kind of stay in a similar length, but they end up focusing more as like a stabilizer for the knee. So it's not a hamstring exercise. If you're looking at a hamstring exercise that's barbell related, it's going to be a stiff-legged deadlift. But a sumo deadlift is a really shitty overall hypertrophy exercise to begin with. Okay,
so face up, body weight lying leg curls. Like if you put your feet in some type of like bossable, med ball, whatever, but you're facing up.
Yeah, and so the suspended version of those are pretty good. The ones where you put your feet on like a Bosu ball and pull in, they're not quite as good as the ones where your feet are more suspended and you're kind of pulling your whole body weight in, if you know which ones I'm talking about. So when you're pulling that Bosu ball in, what you're mostly training there is the calves, because the first 15 degrees or so of knee flexion is really just the gas drop. And so when you get on the ball like that and you pull them in, the hamstrings shorten, but basically there's nothing there as they shorten for them to contract against, to be honest. But when you have the suspended kind where you're hanging, you're still actually pulling against your body weight, which is kind of suspended in the air, right? So those are a little bit better.
Okay. What about one-legged RDLs? One-legged RDLs.
Yeah, one-legged RDLs. That's a glute. It's more glute, not hamstring.
Okay.
Okay, but
okay.
It's a great glute exercise.
Okay. Moving on. Nordic leg curls.
Not a fan.
Not a fan.
Not a fan. You're talking about the one where people hold your ankles or whatever, and I mean,
Oof, yeah.
right. So basically, it's an eccentric base exercise. So for something like athletes who maybe suffer hamstring strains or find some degree of athletic carryover from doing those for hammies, but from a hypertrophy standpoint, it's not a very good movement because it requires a high degree of like stability, and you're just training kind of a portion eccentric. Most people aren't going to be strong enough in the eccentric, and even if they are, once again, that first 15 degrees or so where it's going to be the hardest is not as much going to be as much hamstrings. It's going to be the gastroc helping to pull you up through that knee flexion. So
Yeah. Okay. So summarizing, which one would be the best to target hammies?
Seated leg curls are going to be really good. And then if you can do a proper stiff leg deadlift, that's going to be pretty good as well.
Okay, moving on. Glutes. Okay, reverse lunges.
Okay, reverse lunges. I love reverse lunges. Very good.
Good. Okay. Front pumps.
No. Probably that'll be the biggest no in this whole like what's bad. It's a legitimately bad exercise that jams the hip joint and doesn't actually train the glutes so at all.
Okay.
And some people will say, I feel it in my glutes. You don't feel it in your glutes. You feel it in your piriformis because once you get that high degree of abduction and hip flexion, that's the piriformis doing that. The reason why people get that confused with feeling it in their glutes is because if you're looking at the butt from the back, here's the glute medius and the piriformis runs right under that, right? So it runs right through here. So the glute medius is here and the piriformis is here. So it sits right under that glute medius. So when people feel that piriformis working, because of the regional location of it, they often think it's their glutes that they're feeling, but that's not their glutes.
Okay.
It's kind of like when they do the abduction machine and they're bringing their legs outside and they'll say, but I feel it in my glutes. That's not your glutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Banded abductions. So if you're sitting and you're abducting your legs.
No. You're training abduction and you can train that component function by the piriformis, but not glutes.
Okay. Okay. Hip thrusts.
Hip thrust. Hip thrust is for glutes can be good. What I consider the hip thrust more of a total lower body exercise because there's still a lot of hamstring and there's still a lot of quad that's going to contribute to that movement. And it's also more of an explosive style movement. So I still give the hip thrust a thumbs up for glute training because I do believe it has a place.
Glute bridge.
Yep. Probably the glute bridge and the 45-degree glute raise done for glutes is probably the two best movements you can use to train the glutes in the short position. So big thumbs up.
Kettlebell swings for glute.
Nope. Not hypertrophy movement. Could be something that might be used just to get better kettlebell swings. But when you think about it, you're creating, you're going into that bottom there in kind of a little bit wider stance, which again is going to come back to there's going to be a little more adductor involved in the hip extension. But the other thing is that you're using momentum to get off that bottom. So at the part where the glutes are actually going into hip extension and shortening, you've used momentum to get that weight going. So they're not really contracting against any resistance.
Yeah, that really makes sense. Kickbacks.
Depends on how it's done. So if you're looking for a kickback to work, the only way to work the glute medius in a short position is with a kickback, but it has to be performed with so if here's your legs, it has to be performed at kind of this angle to where the leg is coming back at an angle and you have to stay upright. So you want to stay upright and you kick the leg back so that you're basically working abduction in the plane of like hip extension. So the leg is coming behind you, but it's more of like at an angle.
Moving to upper body. So now when we're looking at back, extended arm row pull, like extending your arms and pulling down. Is it the glute or back?
If you're using two, instead of using like a single rope and coming, if you're using dual cables and coming down, it's a pretty good exercise because you can get a better alignment with what the arm path needs to be for the lats. But otherwise, it's meh.
Okay. Wide grip pull up. So wider grip.
That's not lat. It's going to be upper back. Like if for lats, it'll be down. No.
Narrow grip.
Again, like not like no, basically no. Like if you're talking about that shitty little handle like that everybody, there's nothing that's good for.
Okay. And what about inverted? Like you're grabbing this way.
I mean, that's still gonna be an upper back, more of an upper back based exercise, but there's just gonna be more elbow flexion, so you get some biceps involved in it. So it's not a lat movement. No.
But okay. Unilateral pulls. So just one.
So
Unilateral.
like if we're talking lats and you're coming from this angle, right, and you're driving the elbow straight down, yes, that's what we want. So
Okay.
for lats, the arm's got to be in front of us, and we have to have neutral spine, and we have to be driving the arm down and not pulling past the bottom. So that's
Okay.
one of my favorites.
Dumbbell rows or barbell rows.
Dumbbell rows are okay. Barbell rows used to be a movement I loved, but over the years, like my thinking evolved about better hypertrophy. So with the barbell row, it requires again a high degree of stability, and you've got hip flexion going on because you got your knees, like your legs, like bent in front of you, which means you're gonna have to do a lot of bracing with your erectors and your core and everything else just to move that loading, right? So remember we talked about if we have to do a lot of stability with our body, that there's going to be less output by the muscles we're trying to train. So you'd be much better off doing a chest supported row for upper back than doing something like a barbell row. I still like some T-bar row machines because of the fact that it's affixed to the loading, so you're not having to balance and stabilize against the loading quite as hard. It does some of that for you, but I like using that as like an integrated movement, so you're just training those particular component functions by the scapula, so that you're getting good protraction and retraction. You're basically training that function of the scapula.
Okay. So in summary, what would be your best exercise for back?
For upper back, I really like what most people consider just a pull down. What most people think of as like lat pull downs. I like a wide grip pull down. That's to train mainly the rear delts and the teres and teres minor. I also like pretty much anything where you can use chest supported row. I really like for traps. I really like the hammer strength low to high row, where it's chest supported and it's a low handle and then you pull up high. I like those. And those are kind of my go-to. I also like I do like a dumbbell row, but I like it done on an incline bench where you use both dumbbells and you're laying on the incline. Cause once again, use that as your bracing.
Okay. And you mentioned the pulls, unilateral pulls too?
Yeah. If I do two, it's the same principle. You're pulling from here down, and that's to train lats. If it's a pull down, it's like a wide grip. So you're pulling from here. That's upper back. There's various rows you can do for lats too, but again, it's the same principle that the arm is in front of the body and that you're driving the elbow down and you're pulling right there. So that's going to be what I base my back training around, whether it's lats or upper back.
Moving to chest, body weight push-ups.
No.
No. Okay. What if you use dips for chest?
Yeah, dips I like.
Is there any particular position your feet should go so you're targeting chest and not triceps?
They're really good lower chest, the lower part of your chest, osteal fibers. But what you want is your feet kind of going like this. Like, so if your head's here, your feet are kind of in front of you, because you need this arm path where you're coming like this, right? So you're motion. So the only way to do that is like with a band. I've posted that one a few times.
Let's move on to incline bench press.
Incline bench press done with dumbbells is okay, but not with a barbell.
Okay. What about just plain bench press?
Flat bench press, again, done with the dumbbells, or any type of machine that's basically mimicking that, but not with a barbell.
Why not the barbell?
So a barbell has some significant limitations when training chest. One of the things that we're looking for when we train chest is we want a movement that is actually going to, like the pecs themselves are a converging muscle, right? They do horizontal humeral adduction. So they're going to bring the arm across the body. So when you're locked into a bench press, there's a multitude of things with the bars that limit it to basically working the chest properly. Number one is that you can't move the arm across the body because you're in a fixed position. And then the other thing is that it gives you a crappy resistance profile. So it only loads pecs down here in that lengthened position, and then it basically, the resistance drops off to almost nothing as the pecs start to shorten. And the other thing is, say for example, if we're doing an incline, the motion that we want is more of an arcing motion like this, okay? So we want arcing, but we also want to cross the body. So anytime we're doing chest, we're trying chest on an incline, you're looking for this elbow tuck position, the arms close to you, and then you're coming up and across the body. That is 100% impossible to do with a bar.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Now moving to core.
I don't know. I would rather punch myself in the crotch all day than do ab exercise.
Okay. But maybe just to clarify which one might target best the core if you want to make it better. What would be the best exercise you would recommend?
Probably sex.
Okay, apart from that?
Probably just a basic crunch. Like really
just a crunch?
I don't get into the whole I'm trying to get the abs. The abs don't have a rotational component, and you see people doing a lot of like rotational work. They don't have a rotational component. So just doing some actual crunches and reverse crunches be all right.
What about shoulders? Let's talk about shoulders. Is there any particular exercise you think is the best?
Well, you have 3 divisions to the deltoids. You have the anterior delts, the middle delts, and the posterior delts. I really think you can probably build your shoulders as big as you're ever going to build them using various lateral raises, a proper rear delt row, which is the best way to get the rear delts really shortened.
Okay.
But various lateral raises for the middle delts, and then Y raises, properly done Y raise for the middle delts are great. You don't ever really need to, if you overhead pressing for anterior delts has to be done in a really specific way. Overhead pressing itself is like standing up and overhead pressing straight overhead. Doesn't really do a great job of building deltoids. It's just building that lift. So from a hypertrophy standpoint, that's another one that's just, man.
Yeah. So name one good exercise for triceps.
For triceps, my favorite is crossbody cable extensions. And then that's to train the long head in the short position. So it's time where you come here, come out. And then the other one is really like the behind the head cable extension for training the long head in the lengthened position. So where you're coming from here, overhead. So I like those. Those are pretty much my 2 go-to. And I still do like dips, triceps too.
What about for biceps? What would be your go-to?
For biceps, gosh, I hate training biceps. So anything that actually gets me to train them is pretty good. I like incline dumbbell curls and face weight cable curls, and that's to train the long head in the lengthened position. Outside of that, just probably doing some preacher curls, dumbbell preacher curls. I like doing those. Spider curls I like. So I training the biceps, the long head in the short position. And then sometimes I'll do concentration curls to train the short head. But really, I just hate biceps. But I mean, if I had to go to, I like regular old dumbbell concentration curls, and then face away cable curls. But then I like I like potty curls. I do like potty curls a lot. Training, that's where you actually kneel down in the squat position and you put your elbows against your knees and do curls.
And the last one would be traps and calves. Let's do traps and then calves.
Traps, my favorite over the years has just been an overhead, all the way overhead plate, like raise, like this. That's actually what I know a lot. I still do shrugs from time to time. Shrugs are okay for training the elevating the scapula, but that's also done. The upwards rotation and elevation of the scapula is also done when you buy the traps by moving your hands like this. And this is the only way to actually get the traps fully shortened. So they don't actually get fully when you do a shrug, but when you do an all the way overhead raise, they do. So that's the only way to get the traps shortened. And that's probably my favorite way to actually just train traps. For calves, basically just a good seated calf raise, and then a calf press is better than a standing calf raise. A lot of people like to do standing calf raises, but doing a seated calf press, like a leg press, is better because of that stability component. Like if you're doing a standing calf raise, you're putting a bar on your back. Once again, you're having to stabilize against that load, right? So, but if you just actually sit down in a leg press and do toe presses, you don't have to worry about stabilizing, like, you know, your back and everything against that load. So toe presses and seated calf raise will pretty much, as long as you're patient, you can build some big just those 2 exercises.
All right. Well, I think that's all we have for today. Paul, I am so glad that I was able to chat with you and catch up again. Hope you had a good time too.
I did.
I really thank you for coming up today for our show. Where people can find you, do you have any future projects you want to talk about or anything like that?
Just my usual, just banging things out with yoke squat and the Valkyrie project for men and women. So if you're trying to get ultimately jacked and you're a woman and you want to focus on glutes and legs and delts and that stuff, have the Valkyrie project. If you're a man or a woman and you want to get jacked overall and focus on more overall body hypertrophy, we have the yoke squad. We have a bunch of awesome people in both of those groups, and that is in my bio right here on Instagram.
Awesome. I hope to see you very soon.
Thanks for having me on, Astrid. I appreciate you.
Send you a big hug.
Okay, right back.
Make sure to watch the first episode where we talk about all things hypertrophy. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment below if you have any questions. I will get back to you as soon as possible.